For centuries, humanity has toiled under the tyranny of porcelain thrones. We bow before the great white seat, offering daily sacrifices in its gaping, water-filled maw. But I ask you, why? Why do we willingly confine ourselves to cramped, fluorescent-lit chambers, where the only reading material is the back of a shampoo bottle? Why do we, nature's greatest mistake, pretend we are above the primal freedom of our ancestors? The ancients knew the truth. Before the reign of modernity, before the rise of the big toilet, the world was our restroom, the earth our canvas, the bushes our loyal confidants, and then civilization happened. Yes, my friends, we were sold a lie. The restroom was never for our rest. It was a cell, a cage, a corporate conspiracy meant to keep us obedient, clean, and dignified. But you know who wasn't having any of this? Diogenes, the one true messiah of raw, unfiltered existence. The man who spat in the face of polite society, who slept in a jar, and who, legend says, had no qualms about dropping his philosophy wherever the mood struck. Born around 412 BCE, Diogenes was the king of doing whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, and making everyone around him deeply uncomfortable. He wasn't just a philosopher, he was a professional menace. He was part of the Cynic school of philosophy, which, despite sounding like a Reddit comment section, was all about rejecting material wealth, social norms, and common decency. In other words, he was a one-man rebellion against, well, everything. Most philosophers spent their lives writing books, debating ethics, or just staring at the sky, pretending they had it all figured out, but not Diogenes. Diogenes wasn't just a philosopher, he was the original troll, the godfather of not giving a damn, the man who saw rules, wealth, and power and decided they were all just really boring illusions, and instead of just saying that, he lived it, fully, to the absolute horror of literally everyone around him. Diogenes' lifestyle was the ultimate embodiment of cynicism. He rejected wealth, power, and social conventions in favor of extreme simplicity and self-sufficiency. He lived in a large ceramic jar, often called a barrel, begged for food, and owned almost nothing except a cloak, a stick, and a small bowl, until he saw a child drinking water with his hands and threw the bowl away, realizing he didn't even need that. He believed in living like a dog, valuing instinct and honesty over societal expectations. He'd publicly eat in marketplaces, a big no-no in ancient Greece, urinate on people he didn't like, and even masturbate in public, famously saying, "If only it were as easy to cure hunger by rubbing my stomach." He was essentially history's first minimalist, but instead of calling it a lifestyle, he used it to mock and expose the hypocrisy of those around him. Plato, being the overachiever that he was, once defined a human as a featherless biped, which is technically correct, but Diogenes wasn't about to let that slide. So he grabbed a chicken, plucked it completely bald, and barged into Plato's lecture and said, "Behold, a human." Plato had to awkwardly add, "Okay, a featherless biped with broad, flat nails." Socrates loved asking questions. What is justice? What is virtue? What is the meaning of life? The guy had an existential crisis every afternoon, and people thought he was a genius for it. So one day, Diogenes walked right up to him and said, "Hey, Socrates, can you define wisdom?" Socrates, being Socrates, started rambling about knowledge and virtue and the exam in life, but Diogenes cut him off, pointed at a dog, and said, "That dog lives better than you do. It doesn't overthink everything, and it still gets fed." Socrates just stood there, probably reconsidering his entire career. Aristotle was all about order, logic, and categorizing the world. The man was a walking encyclopedia. He believed everything had a purpose, including humans, who, according to him, were rational beings with a divine function. Diogenes saw Aristotle writing his great works and just threw food at him. When Aristotle asked why, Diogenes said, "I was testing if you'd react like a rational being or just another dumb animal." Aristotle was not amused. And then there's the time he met Alexander the Great. Now, when you're the most powerful man on earth and you personally go up to a homeless dude in a barrel to offer him anything he wants, you expect some respect, maybe even some gratitude. But Diogenes just looked up at Alexander and said, "Move, you're blocking my sunlight." Alexander was so taken aback that instead of having him executed, he just laughed and said, "If I wasn't Alexander, I'd want to be Diogenes." Imagine rejecting power so hard that the guy who conquered the known world respects you for it. Absolute legend. Did I mention he got captured and sold as a slave? Most people in that situation would panic, not Diogenes. When asked what his skills were, he just shrugged and said, "I know how to command men. Sell me to someone who needs a master." And somehow this actually worked. Instead of being forced into hard labor, he ended up as a respected teacher, proving once again that if you have enough confidence, you can talk your way into anything. One of his most famous stunts was wandering around Athens with a lantern in broad daylight. When people asked why, he just said, "I'm looking for an honest man." Spoiler, he never found one. Diogenes spent his whole life proving that society was a joke, wealth was meaningless, and most people were just pretending to be wise. But most importantly, Diogenes taught us that toilets are overrated. So the next time you decide to sit on a toilet to relieve yourself, just remember that somewhere, in the depths of history, Diogenes is watching, and probably very disappointed with what humanity has become. And so I propose a return to tradition, a revolution against the tyranny of the toilet. Join me, my enlightened brethren, in reclaiming the streets as our rightful domain. Imagine the benefits: no more long restroom lines, no more overpriced toilet paper, no more staring at your phone for 45 minutes as your legs go numb. Instead, you will experience the raw power of liberation, the primal joy of asserting dominance over society's most fragile construct, order. But of course, I hear the skeptics already. What about sanitation? What about public health? Did Rome fall because of public defecation? No, it fell because of hubris and bad management, and maybe some lead poisoning, but mostly hubris. And to be honest, modern life is not any cleaner. Have you seen a public restroom? Have you seen a festival porta potty? If anything, shitting in the streets is an act of honesty. No illusions, no perfumed lies, just man and nature in perfect, grotesque harmony. So join me in being free and using the world as our natural toilet.